Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are diving into the strange new world of Dune. Now, um, I do want to point out that we're going to do a review of Dune parts 1 and 2, but for content purposes, I'll be splitting them up into 2 episodes, and then at a later date, I'll be uploading the complete episode of a review of both parts 1 and 2. Um, Now, this was a pretty interesting movie that we saw, and uh, the first Dune came out in what, 2021,
Yep,
Lee?
2021.
Okay, yeah, because it came out during right around the height of the pandemic, and then we did a trailer reaction for Dune Part 2 last year, and we thought it was going to come to cinemas in November of 2023, but that got pushed because of the strike. And we saw Part 2 yesterday. But before we did, I have to admit I never saw Dune Part 1, so I had an incentive to watch it, and it was quite an interesting movie. This was directed by Canadian director Denis Villeneuve, and
Great director.
yeah, and can I say I thought it was a pretty good idea to split it up into parts 1 and 2, just because even though the novel may seem pretty light reading, and I'm saying light in air quotes, there's a lot of material to cover, and it's pretty dense.
Yes.
So it's not so I think if they had tried to stuff everything into a 2 hour long or a 3 hour long movie, it would just overwhelm everybody, right?
Yep.
Um,
We've gotten Dune, the one that came out, and I want to say it was 84, I think.
yeah,
So
84,
that
and then there
would
was
have
the
been what
2001
we got
miniseries.
was that version. So
Well, don't forget the miniseries that came out in 2001
yes,
also.
correct. Yes, there's the miniseries, absolutely.
But even then, I kind of felt like they made a few sacrifices here and there. So I think, and this is just me being biased here. I just think the Villeneuve version kind of matches the vision that Frank Herbert had when he wrote the novel back in '65. But let's go ahead and dive in. So Lee, you were the first to actually uh, watch this movie. What were your impressions? What did you think of the whole
Yeah,
universe?
yeah. So, and I'm glad you phrased it like that, right? Because I think that is really important. That this
It,
is
I mean, it literally is a universe if you think about it.
yes, yeah, absolutely right, and it is very dense, right? This is I love that you said that because I think it's really important for people that are trying to get into this that it absolutely is probably something that like having more than one watch and just be able to kind of absorb all the information, absorb all the terminology. The places like all that stuff is going to be really important. So, I think for anyone that maybe saw like the first one, it absolutely is a great rewatch because I think there's just so much information. It's good to be able to absorb it in kind of multiple viewings because we do see like a lot of that stuff. And there's a kind of a lot of competing discussions as far as like what sort of things you want to be able to talk about in Dune,
And there's just so
because
many.
there is just so much out there.
And I was gonna say, because there's so many themes you could touch on. Because I mean, I remember a few weeks ago, you mentioned that the Bene Gesserit might be a good topic to talk about, but then, in a group text with one of our good friends, he made a mention that the patriarch Leto, Atreides, he kind of suffered the same fate as Ned Stark. So you could sort of go into the whole comparison with Game of Thrones, because there's a lot of parallels between that and the series. Um,
Yes,
I
and
mean,
I think for
it's
yeah,
so medieval if you think about it. It's like Game of Thrones, but in space, because it has such a dark medieval atmosphere to it that you almost forget that it's set in was it 10,000,
yes,
8,000
yeah,
years in the future.
hmm yeah, absolutely, and I think probably Game of Thrones, not to throw that comparison around very lightly, but I think it's probably something that's people are probably the most familiar with. You will see kind of that overlapping interest because you kind of have this like Imperium, which is kind of the overarching empire, and you have these very big houses that kind of create the world that we're going to dive into. And I think the movie does a great job of helping build that up, because we start out on the home planet of House Atreides, where we kind of get to meet all of our critical characters, right? So you got Duke Leto, that's played very, very well by Oscar Isaacs. And honestly, I think the whole cast did a great job. You got Lady Jessica, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson. And Lady Jessica is a part of the Bene Gesserit, which I think we'll probably touch a little bit in a little while, but
Mhm.
that's going to be a very important thing throughout. And then we meet kind of our main character, right? Paul Atreides. And I just love how this movie does such a good job of helping set the foundation for what we're going to see. Um, and I see that in a lot of ways, right? So you get to meet Paul, and I like how when you get to meet Paul, you see a bunch of things that carry over throughout the movie, right? So one, we know that he's a strong fighter. We see that he trains with a character called Gurney Halleck, and he also befriends another person that's a strong fighter in Duncan Idaho. So you kind of have these two characters, and they're clearly setting the foundation that our guy Paul, right? He's not a slouch, right? He's not going to be someone that goes out there is easily beaten up, right? Like he's been training for years to kind of be the successor for House of Trades. The other thing I really like too that I think does a great job of kind of showing what he's all about is you see him like watching kind of these video lectures, and the video lectures are there, and it's kind of helping him understand more about the world. And as he moves forward and goes to Arrakis, you see how he's able to kind of learn about what it's like to live there. So I loved how they built that up. Like they want to help show that this Paul character, like he's not going to just be out there, screwing up, not having any clue about the world, not be able to defend himself. They really built that up at the very beginning, and I really enjoyed that.
Right, because even though
Once you
he's a
kind of
even though he's a fish out of water, I mean, he's not a completely hopeless moron. Like he knows
exactly,
what to do. I mean, it's book
exactly.
learning. It's book learning, but it's somewhere to to go from.
Exactly, right. It's a start. And I think that's what they needed, because, I think we see a lot of times with movies where characters just start doing stuff and there's never any understanding of how they could do something like that. I think, not to bring up Damsel, which I know uh, you kind of watched, and eventually I did come around to watch. Like, there's just times where it, the foundation for what she's able to do is not really made plain to people. Yet,
Right.
right? They make it very obvious that Paul Atreides absolutely is a fully capable person that's, learning about his, environment that he's going to. He's being trained to be an excellent fighter, which we see happen throughout the movies. And I just really like how they built up Paul at the very beginning. Um, so we have House Atreides, right? And then on the other hand, we have House Harkonnen. And that's kind of our evil group, to put it very lightly. So you have kind of Baron Vladimir, and then you have Rabba, who are kind of the two main figureheads of House Harkonnen, and really kind of the what kind of jettisons us to Arrakis, which is where everything takes place. You see that House Harkonnen has been taken away from Arrakis and has been replaced by House Atreides. Now, unbeknownst to the characters, right, the reasons for this are a little bit underhanded, because really the House Atreides becoming the power in Arrakis is really just a guise for them to get killed off. And I think that's kind of where we kind of get really jump started with the whole story, because we go to Arrakis, and I just absolutely enjoy that world, right? And I believe you made a comparison to Lawrence of Arabia, right? Um, and it absolutely feels like that. Like you feel absolutely immersed in this world where we got these sprawling deserts. And you get to meet like some of the really critical parts of this, right? So you got the spice, right? That's the main, I would say, it's the kind of like the unobtainium of this series. Is you have this spice. This spice is the single most valuable resource in the world. It's used for lots of different things, mainly for space travel being the most prominent one. And because of it, Arrakis is a huge place that people want to be at because that spice is just so valuable.
Isn't it
And
isn't Arrakis the only source for the spice?
yes, yes, absolutely. That's a great call out. And yes,
Okay.
Arrakis, during this time frame is the only place that spice can be mined. So that just kind of further creates this idea about how important Arrakis is to everything. Um, so we have Arrakis, and like I said, we have House Atreides ends up going there. And we kind of see Paul, he just kind of continues with being able to learn in the area, and then we start to see some of the other pieces come in, right? So I think this is a great time to talk about the Bene Gesserit, which I don't think you could really go too far without discussing them. The Bene Gesserit is such an interesting inclusion to this universe, right? So the Bene Gesserit kind of have a lot of things going on. So I look at them as kind of this religious sect. And even though I think the Bene Gesserit kind of say they're not religious, I think it's hard to kind of ignore that. But you pretty much have the Bene Gesserit who are there, and they're really there to, how would I put this?
They kind of embed themselves in the beds of noble houses.
Yes, that's true, right? So they do literally um, do it like that, right? And they have kind of the ear of the emperor, right? So I think it's a faction that's kind of very much ingrained into this whole universe because what they do is they're really there to kind of help create their version of this kind of strong being, right? That's kind of what they're there for. Something called, I believe it's pronounced, and I apologize if I butcher this, the Kwisatz Haderach, right? That's kind of their one, and that's what they're ultimately trying to do. So what the Bene Gesserit do is, they have kind of this very long-standing, kind of, I guess, genetic breeding that they're doing, where they're trying to help get really important traits to kind of create this special being who's going to be a male. So all the Bene Gesserit are females. Their, kind of their ultimate goal is to have a strong male that ends up becoming kind of this prophet. And we kind of see how the Bene Gesserit are playing in this. So we see how they're kind of the one that's whispering in the Emperor's ear about, hey, you need to bring apart the fall of House Atreides. We even see Lady Jessica, who is a Bene Gesserit. She has a clear relationship with her husband Leto, but even for her, she is just a character that um, has her own idea of what she wants to do. So even though she's a part of this kind of like religious sect, ultimately she still kind of has her free will where she's able to do what she wants to do. And we see how the Bene Gesserit, they've really had this impact in Arrakis, right? So we have the Fremen being the indigenous people that are all on Arrakis. So the Bene Gesserit have kind of come in, and they've kind of spread the word of the Bene Gesserit, right? They're pretty much just explaining like, hey, there's going to be this prophet that comes in. They use the term the Lisan al Gaib, and that ends up being kind of this prophet that they're all expecting to come in, and that's really spread by the Bene Gesserit. So I really enjoy how we have this kind of religious faction, and we can kind of see how this religious faction is perverting the world, right? They're doing all this stuff for their own means, and so many people are brought up in it from the emperor on down. So I absolutely love that rendition. I thought that was super good. Did you have anything to chime in with the Bene Gesserit just to make sure I covered everything as far as what they're about?
I mean, they kind of. I mean, if you think about it, you know how like in the real world people say, oh, the Illuminati are controlling everything behind the scenes. We just don't know about it. It's kind of like if someone took the Illuminati rumor and like dialed it up to 11, right? And to reinforce that fact, the Illuminati basically decide, well, the best way to manipulate events to our favor is to kind of get into bed literally with the most powerful people in the universe and kind of steer them you know to where we want to go. So they kind of take that maxim, make love not war, and kind of just twist it on its head. But it's just so fascinating at how at how much influence they exert on everybody. Um, because you kind of get this feeling that everybody is afraid of them.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
because even when because even when the Reverend Mother talks to Vladimir Harkonnen, you can sort of tell he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna fuck with these people. I mean, I mean, because someone like Vladimir Harkonnen, who could give two shits about honor and is basically backstabbing everybody he meets, even he knows he's not going to double cross these people. You know?
Yep, and I think that, like I said, the fact that they have kind of some of these powers, I think, kind of helps in grading that too, right? Because I think there's a definite fear for that because for the Bene Gesserit, right, they do have these kind of visions, right? And we see Paul starts to have some of them himself, but they absolutely have these visions where they're able to see glimpses of the future. They also have something that's referred to as the voice, which is this ability to kind of influence people. So they are, even though they're kind of this, like I said, religious sect, they do have very clear powers that I think definitely kind of puts them into a boat of there's probably a very good reason that people fear them because they do have this power. So, but yeah, absolutely. It is, like I said, a very interesting take on, kind of creating these people that, in essence, have um, powers in this world. So it is a very interesting thing. Um, so I would say on Arrakis, we kind of get all this kind of like dumped on our plate, and we kind of slowly start to see, how I think how good of a leader Duke Leto is, right? I think obviously Harkonnens not very likable people, and this is a very much a polar opposite to have Leto be in this world. And we see that he's someone that is very much of honor, like he wants things to be fair. He focuses on his people, like he's someone that I think everyone wants a good leader to be. Very much to the tone of Ned Stark.
Yeah, I was
In a
gonna.
way,
I was gonna
right?
say like, I mean, and I even said in the group text, I was like, the Harkonnens, they do give off this Lannister vibe about them.
Yes,
You know?
yes, it absolutely is. It's hard to totally avoid that comparison because it absolutely has some credence in this. So we start to see House Atreides and the Fremen really trying to help build this actual positive relationship. But unfortunately, it comes to a very quick halt because we have House Harkonnen comes in, and they end up pretty much wiping out all of House Atreides in a single night. It is a total one-sided event. I do think it's a little bit weird. I know they try to explain that, like, oh, we got rid of we brought down the defenses and everything like that, but it's kind of hard to imagine you have all these ships coming to this area and nobody picks up on it until it's too late. That was one thing that kind of was a little bit distracting to me. But regardless, pretty much House Atreides gets wiped off the map very, very quickly. Um, uh, the Duke ends up getting captured, and fortunately, Paul and Lady Jessica end up being able to escape. They were being taken to their death in essence, but they were able to kind of break through and escape. And this is, I think, where the Ned Stark comparison will continue, is that we have um, Duke Leto, and pretty much he decides that he's going to do his best to go out with a bang. So he has like this tooth, right? That has this. I don't know if they ever explain it, but it's
It's a
some
capsule,
type of
basically.
airborne. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Would you say?
No, I was gonna say, like, basically, Doctor Yue tells him it's a capsule. He just has to bite down on it,
Correct.
and
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's like some type of airborne thing that kills people in close proximity, right? So, this is where unfortunately, Duke Leto dies, and he's able to take out the room that actually has the Baron from House Harkonnen involved with it, and pretty much he's able to unfortunately not kill him, but ends up severely damaging him, and something where he needs kind of like constant care moving forward, because he was able to kind of inflict this kind of grievous injury on him.
yeah, because he's got to take some
Um,
weird mud bath, doesn't he?
yes, yeah, he goes into like weird tar stuff. It's I don't think ever really explained. And he that's kind of what we do. We see him throughout this movie and the next movie, still needing to do that. I'm assuming probably on a daily basis, if not more. So, obviously leaves a very lasting impact on him. And this is where we have kind of Paul and Jessica trying to survive out in the desert, where we kind of finally get to meet the Fremen. So we've kind of met them briefly. We met Stilgar, who's a leader of one of the various, like, there's a lot of different sects for the Fremen.
Yeah,
So Stilgar being one of the leaders of one of the ones that's close to where they land. Um, and we also get to meet Shawnee, right? And Shawnee is someone that Paul has been having visions about. So I thought it was very, when we finally get to meet her, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm sure that must be very jarring for your character to finally meet this person he's been dreaming about for quite some time. So we finally get to meet the Fremen. Obviously, people, even within the Fremen, have very different ideas about what they need to do. And this is where we start to kind of see more of that religious aspect play up, because Stilgar, who's the kind of the leader that we meet, he's very much believes in this idea of the Lisan al Gaib. Once again, that being the kind of prophet that's going to, kind of bring them to paradise. So you have kind of this, belief in that, whereas other people, even within this group of Fremen that we follow, um, believe that that's all a bunch of crap, right? And they believe and they look at both Paul and Jessica as being pretty much spies. Um, so our kind of first movie ends with Paul gets into a fight, and it was with Jamis. Is that the name? Am I remembering that right?
yeah. I mean, what's weird is that during that period where he's trying to survive out in the desert, like he keeps getting visions of Jamis, and you would think that Jamis, when he meets him, he's like, oh, I'm this wise sage, I know of you, but but in fact, he's really really hostile to the tribe accepting Paul and Jessica
Yes.
into the
He's
group.
very much the opposite of what you
I,
would probably be thinking of.
I'll be honest with you, I kind of like that because because it kind of curbs your expectation because you're thinking, oh, he of all people, all people in the Fremen would know who Paul is and acknowledge him, but no, he's just like, no, I don't want this guy in here. And you would think Paul would say something to kind of counter that, but he doesn't say anything, which is a bit odd. But
Yes. Yeah. And to me, the most surprising thing is, so they end up having this fight, right? So pretty much, they have kind of this kind of breakdown where Jamis is like, no, like, I don't like these people, I don't trust them. I want to fight these people, and pretty much Jamis and Paul have this fight to the death. Paul kind of shows once again, right, his strong fighting technique that he's learned over the years. So you see him kind of not toying with him per se, but he's very reluctant to kill him because this is, he's never killed a guy before. So Jamis ends up being killed, and this is Paul's first kill, right? First of unfortunately many, as we'll see in as we move forward. But this is kind of the original kill, and that to me is what makes Jamis's character so jarring to me because, well, like you pointed out, it's interesting that we're expecting this Jamis to be a more critical character, a character that plays, maybe a stronger role in Paul's kind of getting into power. But he ends up just kind of being a character that gets killed within a few minutes of us meeting him. So it is very interesting how they kind of play on that idea that these visions, while they're there to help be like prophetic and help see the future, kind of the purpose or how critical they are very much depends on case by case. And that's kind of where I think our first movie ends, where unfortunately we got House Atreides totally defeated. You have Paul and Lady Jessica kind of out in the fringes, and we're finally be able to meet the Fremen, who are kind of this kind of all different people with different beliefs, and they're all kind of in different areas. So we finally get a chance to meet them, and like I said, it is, to me, I thought the first one, it needed to end somewhere. It just felt like the end was, I guess, very odd to me. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's like one of those things where you get to, I don't know. I don't know. How do you feel about the ending for the first movie, right? Where it kind of just ended on this kind of fight with Jamis and then just kind of continuing to go to like kind of this Fremen stronghold.
I mean, in one sense, I can sort of understand why they ended it that way because because it does show Paul, at least in the initial stages of trying to start or initiate what what his father wanted to do, was to create an alliance with the Fremen, right? But at the same time, I feel like you get to this apex where where everybody in House Atreides and their retainers are massacred, and then the desert portion's kind of like that drop off point, and it's like, well, where else can you go from here? Because and you mentioned this before, Jamis is kind of is kind of built up as, or at least the visions of Jamis they're kind of built up as like this expectation of, oh, this is going to be leads to the next step, and it kind of just ends abruptly with Jamis being killed, and you're like, well, that was a huge letdown in a way. Now, and this is just me spitballing here. Do you think the movie would have, part one would have been better had it ended with, um, you know, Paul and just Lady Jessica trying to escape and they get captured, and then we're kind of left with a sort of, you know, apprehension of what's going to happen to them. Do you think that would have made a better ending?
Probably, probably. I think I would have liked that a bit more because I think kind of the unfortunate thing with this, and like I said, there's with how much you have to kind of put into these movies, I just don't know. You could kind of pick and choose where you want to leave it, but to me, that would have been, I think, more interesting because I feel like you have this really big battle, right? So when you're kind of like just out in the desert and you're just kind of having this kind of small interaction, it does make it a little bit more challenging to find like a really good time to stop. So I think it's one of those things where it's like you had this big climax and you kind of end it as it's tailing off. And, not probably a lot of different ways that you can look at it. Maybe it's, kind of deals more with, like you pointed out, like maybe they escape, and then as their ship is crashing, like maybe the Fremen show up, and there's like kind of this altercation where you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Maybe that makes more sense. Maybe Jamis is the one that ends up capturing them, and you kind of leave it on that note. Obviously, if you do it like that, then this movie starts off the second movie where you have this fight with Jamis, and it becomes very anticlimactic. So I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can look at that, but yeah, I think probably would have liked to have seen the ending just being a different spot because you have this huge massacre that happens, and it kind of ends with this one-on-one fight with Jamis, and that's kind of how it ends with them kind of marching off into the desert. So yeah, like I said, I think for the first one, I just loved how much role we get to see. They absolutely know how to handle that. We got to meet the critical houses. We get to meet, we get to learn more about Arrakis, which is where everything kind of happens. Get to learn more and more about the Fremen. So you have kind of all these things that the first one really helps build up for, and I think they do a fantastic job at that. It's so easy, I think, to get sucked into the Dune universe. And certainly, if you do watch the first one, there's loads of great material that's out there for you to understand and to learn more about the world that they're in.
I mean, I will say this. I mean, for an epic movie, it kind of has a really really small cast of characters when you think about it.
Yeah, that's
And
great
and
point. Yeah,
yeah, and that's what I enjoy because it's like it's easy to keep tabs on who's who because you know for the most part, most of the insignificant characters they kind of play their bit and they kind of just tail off. Like Duncan Idaho, for instance. I mean, as as sad as it was to see him go, I mean he played his part and there was no other role he could play. Um,
yeah,
so so I think that kind of worked to their advantage because how many times have we seen like these big epic movies where where you have all these characters and you're like, okay, so I think I know who the core characters are, but what are the other characters in the periphery doing? Um, and the big offender here would be the Star Wars franchise because you have so many of these characters just like popping, popping in and out, and you're like, or I know this guy and I know this guy, but what the hell does that character do? I'm not quite sure what role they play, and when they do play that role, you're like, oh, okay, so it's not as big as we thought it was. But here it's like you have a small cast of characters, you know who everybody is, and they play their role perfectly, and they play it up to a point, and then they kind of, to use theater lingo, they exit stage left, and that's it. You know, they contribute to their part as appropriately. But what would you give? What score would you give for Dune Part One?
yeah. So I would say for Dune Part One, I thought I was a solid 4.2 spices out of 5. I think they did a great job. I don't, and I guess one thing definitely should talk about is the worms, right?
Yeah.
Worms, super cool. We get to see them a little bit. They're kind of the big predator in the desert. But yeah, it is like I said, really cool to see them. And like I said, I think yeah, I gave it a solid 4.2. I thought it was good. I thought it set the foundation for a lot of things. I could certainly understand that for people that are maybe more action oriented. I would say yes, they definitely do have some of that, but it's definitely not until the latter half. So I can understand some people might be turned off by that, but I think if you are looking for kind of like a true epic where you're really getting a chance to be a part of this world, the first movie does a very, very good job of that. It certainly got me very excited for the second one, which we saw yesterday.
Yep. So I'll give it 4.3 spices. And I will say this, I mean this is a pretty big universe. There's just so much information packed into it. I mean, I had to go into Wikipedia and look up all these things because it's like y- there's just so many different moving parts into it. You've got the Bene Gesserit, you've got the Space Guild, you've got all these different houses, you've got the the Emperor Shaddam the Fourth of the Imperium. I mean, there's just so much going on, and I think what Dennis Villeneuve did was find a way to make it. He made it palatable to both the diehard fans who have been devoted to this franchise for years, but also giving newcomers a taste of what this universe is all about. Um, and and I think for his part, he managed to please both crowds because the hardcore fans can say I'm pretty satisfied with what he's done. He's pretty much been faithful for the most part to the books, and the newcomers can say, wow, this is some pretty exciting shit here. I can definitely roll with it. Um, my only complaint here, and this might actually extend to to Frank Herbert, but I kind of feel like with House Harkonnen, because we see this happen quite a lot. I mean, we know who the villain is, right? It's like they look, they act, they speak in a way where you're like, yep, this guy is sus as hell. We better put a red alert on him. Um, and House Harkonnen is no different because I mean the way they look, it's like yeah, these are like some pretty menacing dudes, as
Yes.
opposed to the Atreides. As opposed to the Atreides, you're like, oh, these guys are like the nicest people you've ever met. I could see them bringing like a nice plate of pie to their new neighbors down the street, right? Um, so that would be my only my major, well, not my only complaint, but my major complaint would be House Harkonnen could kind of be a bit more I guess fleshed out as characters because they
Yeah.
kind of because I mean like I said, how many times have we said this in all the reviews that we've done when we talk about villains, right? It's just it's just so easy to make the protagonist good, but it's so hard to make the antagonist kind of relatable, right?
Yeah. It's
But
they're very much black and white, good versus evil.
I mean, literally,
in our
literally,
code.
literally, when we go into part two, I mean, their home world is where everything is literally in black and white.
Yes.
So it's like and I was gonna say too because they kind of look like Nosferatu, like it's like the whole family just looks like they're vampires, really. So I mean, so there's no other way to kind of like portray them as evil than to make them look like the most evil character you can think of in film. But for but that aside, I mean, I think the acting was phenomenal. I mean, can I just say the special effects were amazing. And the filming locations, the way that they filmed it, like Caladan, the planet of the home planet of House Atreides, that ocean world. Oh my god, it looks so beautiful. And then you contrast it with Arrakis. It's like it's just. I mean, everything about it is just amazing. Like I mean, we can go on for hours and hours just talking about just the aesthetics of it, but it's one of those movies where it works on so many levels. It works very well aesthetically. I mean, the music. I mean, don't forget the music score was phenomenal as well. I don't know if you mentioned that as well. Obviously, the acting is definitely sets the bar. The story writing for the most part is great. So, I mean, I would definitely
Is it done by
recommend.
Hans Zimmer, right? Fantastic composer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for for the most part, this is one of those movies that I will definitely watch again. Even if I'm not watching it to kind of like learn more about the universe, just to watch it because it's such a wonderful piece of work. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if years from now they put this in the what's that list that they have, the congressional like list of like
Yes, I know what you're
historical
referring
films.
to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could definitely see that making the list at some point in the next few decades or so. All right, so that's going to do it for our review of Dune Part One, and just let us know down in the comments below what you think, and we'll catch you on the next one.